So one of the things that I wanted to talk about that I see you guys asking all the time in the comments is how can I get better at identifying various different things in a headphone's frequency response or tuning just by listening to it, without looking at measurements or anything like that. I got to stress that so much of it is experience with a wide variety of equipment. That counts for a ton, right? But I think even if you don't have a measurement rig, not everybody has the luxury of being able to afford one of those. I really do still think that it is possible to learn what to listen for in a headphone. And so without further ado, I'm going to go through my tips for doing that. Let me know if you like this kind of stuff, because as the weather gets nicer, it's going to be increasingly easier to do this kind of stuff. I never really know. In fact, I'm not really sure what the audio quality is going to be like for this, because I don't normally film like this. And so I haven't really set anything up, but I certainly like walking, so that's nice. If anything, maybe I should do a review of walking outside and give the pros and cons and get really into the details and nitty-gritty like we do with headphones. Maybe that's too much as well. Maybe just like walking, I could talk about sort of the experience, be a subjectivist about walking, never mind measuring the steps that I take. But I think in a similar vein to listening to headphones, listening to music, listening to speakers, there's a sense of the experience that gets missed when you focus too hard on measurable things like how many steps per second or minute or whatever I'm taking, or how fast my heart rate is going, the color of the grass, all these various different features of being outside. Features? Yeah, we're going there. I can still hear the power lines. It's slightly unnerving, but it sounds like a tube amplifier when you turn it up way too high and you have really sensitive headphones. So the first thing that I'm going to recommend to anybody who wants to get better at listening is to see if you can find some headphones that are reference tuned or very close to reference tuned. And you don't need to spend a ton of money to get that. But I do recommend something like the AKG K371, the Sennheiser HD600, HiFiMan Sundara, those types of headphones. Honestly, even the HD650 or HD6XX is close enough. And I say close enough there because, it's a little bass boosted, sure, in the upper bass and lower mids. So it's a bit warmer, but at least above 900 hertz or 1K, it's pretty darn close to being neutral. And the reason why you want a reference-tuned headphone or something like a reference-tuned headphone to get better at listening is because it always helps to have a reference point there for what stuff should sound like. And because often you run into the circle of confusion with, the music that you're listening to where you're not totally confident about the production value because the headphones that you're listening to the music on are colored in some way, or they have an elevation in one region or another. And so this can have somewhat of a skewing effect. So I guess the goal here is to try and find some way of coming out of the circle of confusion there. And that leads to the second recommendation for getting better at listening. This is going to be a bit loud. I apologize. I apologize for nature. I'll just walk by this babbling brook. What's the frequency response of that? Is that a good tuning? So the second recommendation that I have for learning how to be a better listener is to identify 5 recordings that are good, that are well produced, well recorded, and it could be 10, but just stick with 5 for now. And I'll even leave a link in the description for some tracks that I recommend for doing listening tests. But yeah, just pick 5 tracks and then listen to those 5 tracks on the reference headphones. That was tip number 1. So this gives you a baseline for how stuff should sound. Then the third thing that you're going to do is you're going to download some sort of EQ software. Now, I know what you guys are thinking, and before you freak out about EQ, I want to stress that this is not about EQing your headphones. This is more just about learning how to listen for what different frequency ranges do, what elevating or decreasing different frequency ranges do to the music that you're listening to. And you're gonna look at the frequency response, the measurements of the headphones that you have, the reference headphones that you have, whether it's the K371 from AKG or the 600 from Sennheiser's or HiFiMan Sundara, whichever one it is. And you are going to pick a spot in the frequency response that you want to change, and then you're going to elevate it or decrease it by, around 3 dB, 4 dB, something like that, and have a medium Q value. So a Q value of around 2 should be fine here. And listen to your tracks while boosting that range or decreasing that range, right? And then listen to the same tracks and just keep doing this for various different parts of the frequency response. And that way you'll know whenever you hear that, the next time you hear it on a headphone without EQ, then you'll know what that sounds like. Because I think that's one of the key things that's often missing when people are evaluating headphones is the reference point. Now, those are sort of the main things that I would do to learn how to be a better listener. Those 3 things. But if you don't want to go out and buy a new headphone, which, maybe you don't have a reference headphone and you don't feel like you want to do that, that's fine too. And I have a recommendation for you as well. And I think the important thing, if you don't want to go out and buy a new headphone, is find a bunch of reference tracks. So that point number 2 there, find a bunch of reference tracks that you know are well recorded and make sure they use vocals. Reference tracks with vocals are always going to be easier to judge the tonal balance of headphones on because everybody knows what vocals are supposed to sound like, what voices are supposed to sound like. And the reason this is important is because if you're picking a bunch of music that is, synthetically generated tones or, even instruments and things like that, if you don't have a real life reference point for those instruments or those generated tones or whatever it is, you're not going to be able to know what that's supposed to sound like. So when you're listening to headphones that have a coloration, it doesn't really matter because you don't have a reference point for that in real life. See, now here we have another babbling brook. And I get the feeling that this one's a little brighter. The tonal balance of this babbling brook is maybe a little more diffuse field, whereas the other one was a little bit more Harmon. So I gotta say, I'm a little bit more into the other one. You guys be the judge. This is ridiculous. So stick with test tracks that have a reference point in real life. Now, again, maybe you're a musician or you've been to a concert and who hasn't been to a concert? Probably some people, actually. That's terrifying to think about. But, listen to music in real life, get a sense of what those instruments are supposed to sound like, right? Take an acoustic guitar, right? That's not really that difficult to, listen to. And then try and make sure that what you're listening to agrees with that. And use that as your basis or your reference point. Use the real life instrument or sound. And again, this is why vocals, I think, are the easiest thing to use, because it's pretty easy to tell when something is not right with vocals because we naturally know what voices are supposed to sound like. So that's sort of the one, I guess, constant for everybody. Babbling brook. So this one's even warmer. That's pretty dark, actually. It's like an Ether 2. I'm not going to say it's a Nighthawk. We're not at that level. But this is quite nice, actually. I'm going to rate this solid 7.5 out of 10 for nature walk reviews. Whoa, Jesus. That was a massive fly. Anyways, find the constant and try and then anchor your evaluation of tonal balance to that constant that's in real life. The reference track that has vocals, for example. And if it doesn't, figure out where in the frequency response it doesn't. And then this is, again, where you're going to get into EQ. So while I generally advocate using EQ to tune your headphones to your preference, even if you're not into doing that, you can use EQ to help get a better sense of what to listen for. Because even just taking, for example, 5K or 5.5K and boosting that, and then listening to a track with lots of percussion sounds will give you an indication of what percussion compression sounds like, or just any sort of compression in general, provided that the headphones that you have don't have a recession there. And that's where things get tricky. So you do have to have a sense to some degree of the frequency response of the headphones that you have. And that's, again, why I recommend using something that's a little bit more, reference class. Wow. This is interesting. Let me talk a little bit about the sound of the Softears RSV here. And while it might be a little too upper mid forward for, certain genres like rock or metal or any of that stuff any of that garbage that I like, for my jazz tracks, this is fantastic. The frequency response, the tuning here is outstanding. I'm also noticing it has really nice bass response. It has almost exactly the right amount of bass level for me. It's very close to what I would call neutral. And there's another interesting thing about this that I'm noticing, and it's that it has really good treble extension as well. So not boosted like the, Tin Hi-Fi P2 or anything like that, or honestly, there's a number of other ones out there that are boosted in the treble, especially for the upper treble. This seems right on the money. So this is kind of similar in the treble as far as the balance goes to the Audio Clairvoyance. I think that's a really good thing. So for my money, this is a contender. I'll need to spend a little bit more time with it to get a sense of the technical performance. I do find, though, I don't have any real issues with the staging or the instrument separation. I think for the detail retrieval, this is going to be tricky because we need to compare it to the Monarch, the Clairvoyance, one of the two, because I have a reference point for each of those, and they are different. And then I'm also going to need to compare this to the Moondrop S8 and the Dunu SA6. I think that's going to really kind of help solidify where this fits. But as far as the overall sound right now, this is extremely competitive, and I'm really happy that this is released, I guess. This is out, and it's another really high-end, really carefully tuned, semi-high-end IEM that I think competes with those The Audio Twins. Other intangible things, the cable, not so great. It looks and feels great when you just use just a small little bit here, and it feels reasonably sturdy, but it seems to just constantly be holding its shape. So not the hugest fan of the ergonomics or the cable. Anyways, more babbling brooks ahead. All right, I'm gonna switch it up and grab the EST1112. This is like a mega babbling brook. Holy moly. This is like Susvara level babbling brook. All right, not only do we have the tuning right here, but the detail is also spectacular. So, Dunu EST 1112. I think it's 1112. I don't know where the 1112 comes from. 1, 1, 2, 2, 1, 1. I don't know. I'm just gonna call it the EST. It's an interesting design on here. Silver. It feels sturdy. It feels solid. I like it, but it's not the usual sort of acrylic shell. For me, I love this kind of design. Very simple, but still has a little bit of flair to it. It's not as cool looking as the Softears, but still really nice. I'm gonna go to the same track here. Same tracks, because I was listening to a few there. And yeah, let's give it a shot. Oh, we are walking into the abyss. Not sure if you can even see anymore. I don't think I have that much battery life left, but might as well go for a quick stroll into here. We're gonna get eaten by a bear. That's what's gonna happen. At least I'll have it on camera, unless the battery dies, in which case, it'll be tough. Life is hard. If a headphone reviewer gets eaten by a bear in the forest, does anybody care? It's the question that everybody's asking themselves right now. This seems as good a spot as any. Wow, I'm definitely gonna walk in there, but the battery's probably gonna run out on this, so let's give my impressions right now. I don't know if this is as detailed as the RSV, but it's pretty close, and I might need to, if anything, I think that's probably where the RSV is not as competitive, or it's competitive, but it's not outshining the competition. Whereas I think for detail, this might be outshining the competition at its price point, because they come in at different price points. Now, as far as the tuning is concerned here, I'm less enthusiastic about the tuning of the Dunu EST1112. It occasionally ends up being a little bit on the thicker side in the lower mids, but then the bass on it is just fantastic. I'm not quite sure I'm as on board with the tonal balance there for bass to mids, at least the transition. I kind of prefer my bass to be a little bit more distinct. And this seems to have more of it sounds like it has a more gradual kind of presence there in the lower mids. but it does lend itself well to instrumental tracks, so that's good. And then my only real, I guess, complaint about the tuning here so far is there seems to be just a hint of that, you know, I want to say 5-6K boost that I've called percussion compression in the past. I think that's there for this, but also it's not too much. So again, this is one where it seems to do really well for my jazz tracks, but I imagine it wouldn't do quite so well for some more upbeat music. But I think that's actually okay. Dunu has the SA6, which is that more kind of relaxed presentation in the upper mids, similar to what's going on with the 64 Audio U12T with the tuning there, very similar. And this is a lot closer for the overall balance to something like the Blessing 2, the original, for the overall level of the upper mids. It's just, I think this is a little bit more maybe forward there in the lower treble. I don't know if personally I would take this over the SA6, but for certain genres, I could see it working quite well. And it is also quite detailed for the price. I need to spend more time with this and see if I need to do more tip rolling. This is just the final E-tips on here. So I'll need to do more tip rolling and see, what I prefer and if the tonal balance works for me. Get out of here, mosquito. Mosquitoes, no. All right, time to go into the woods. If you don't hear from me in the next week, it's because I've been eaten by a bear or people. I don't know, maybe there's just somebody out here living out here looking for headphone reviewers to consume. But okay, that basically does it for this first impressions. But yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. And let me know if you like this kind of stuff. I'm sure the audio quality was terrible, and I'm sure the video quality was terrible as well. But that's okay. Bye for now.